Hello and welcome to the Social and Emotional Distance Learning webinar series, supporting social emotional learning throughout your system. This is webinar 1 of 4, and we are targeting educational leaders here in this webinar. And my name is Diane Crum. I'm from the California Department of Education. I work in the Educator Excellence and Equity Division in the Professional Learning Innovations Office. And it's important that here at the CDE, it's important that our presentations are accessible to everyone, including those with visual impairments. And for that reason, we will be reading our slides today. And as participants join, if you please feel free to go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat, include your name and how to pronounce it, as well as your role. And just a few housekeeping items we need to review. All participants will be muted during the webinar, please keep your microphone muted unless otherwise directed. And you can click on the small arrow next to the microphone to start or change your audio connection, and then post questions in the chat. We will have a Q&A session at the end, but we don't want to miss a teachable moment. So if you have a question right at that moment, go ahead and put it in the chat, and we'll try to address it as soon as we can. You can also adjust your screen view. You can toggle between speaker view and gallery view as well. So today's webinar is hosted by the CDE, and I am joined by 2 of my colleagues from the Professional Learning Innovations Office, Erica St. Andre and Sarah Smith. Erica will help present, and Sarah's going to oversee our chat. And we also have some very distinguished guest speakers today, Dr. Lucy Vezzuto, Wendy Barron, and also from the Meaning Makers Collective, we have Michelle Curta and Judy Fernandez. And we'll go more in depth into an introduction of each of them right before they present. So in today's webinar, we will participate in a welcoming ritual activity, and that will lead us into a mindfulness activity or self-care activity. And then we're going to introduce the SEL's practice number 1, and we'll hear from our very special guest speaker, Dr. Lucy Vezzuto. And then we'll introduce signature practices 2 and 3. We'll open up for question and answers. We'll look at our upcoming 3 webinars, and then we'll do an optimistic closure before we end today. So hopefully today, we will introduce the 3 signature SEL practices, and we're going to give you time to practice with and reflect on these 3 signature practices before leaving. And before we get started with our content, we would like to check in with you to see how you are doing. And check-ins like these at the start of a professional development or meetings can be a quick but effective way to gauge the needs and capacity of your group to engage in meaningful work. And take this time to self-assess how you are doing by completing the poll to indicate what color status you are in. Choose gray if you're feeling listless and unfulfilled, even if busy, your time does not feel positive or rewarding. And choose blue if you're bored, feeling unproductive and wishing for others more to do or more interesting work. And choose green if it's a good balance of work, feeling positive and productive and you have room to review and innovate. Yellow if you're busy, lots of things to do, but keep an eye out for the signs of orange. Orange is very busy, juggling many priorities, difficult to add course corrections, new thinking or additions. And then red, imminent overload. You can only handle main priorities and you need help reprioritizing to change your status. Moving on here. So self-care is a priority, not a luxury. And so remember that self-care, especially during this difficult time. So if your color status is gray, blue, orange, or red, then self-care is a high priority for you. So I'd like to now introduce Michelle Curta and Judy Fernandez from the Meaning Makers Collective. And Michelle Curta is an educator, coach, and facilitator working in the dynamic intersections between teaching, learning, healing, and justice. And for over 15 years, Michelle has engaged in educational equity and justice work as a student, organizer, and teacher. Judy Fernandez is an educator, facilitator, and coach who recently worked as a resilience and trauma-informed practices coach for a national initiative focusing on school employee well-being and transformative school cultures. You can find more about these two ladies in an in-depth bio in the resources folder that I'll share at the end. And a link will be provided. So I'm going to turn it over now to Michelle and Judy.
Anyway, so we are, Judy and I right now, are Meaning Makers Collective. And as you see on the screen, and I'll read it, our mission is to expand the capacity of people to make meaning of their lives and cultivate cultures of healing and justice. And as former educators, Judy as a school administrator, we now do this work with schools and with organizations and with communities. So we work through professional development and training. We do some coaching for leaders of organizations, of schools, or for teams. We do some organizational consulting or strategic planning type work. And we also facilitate and plan events and retreats and other meaningful gatherings. So that's just a little bit about the different types of things that we do. And today, we're going to be working with you all and just offering a little practice around resourcing our well-being. So in our work, we use this term resourcing, and maybe folks are familiar with it, maybe not, maybe in a different context. But in this context of self-care and well-being, we use this term resourcing to mean a way to help to stabilize and balance our minds and bodies when we might be experiencing some kind of distress. So resource, it's like reaching for a resource that might be a close, trusted relationship. It might be an internal memory or a sense that we go to when we're feeling overwhelmed. It might actually be an external resource, something, maybe it's drinking water, maybe it's taking a walk. So we use that term to really cover all of these things that we might reach for or go towards or tap into in times when we're experiencing distress. And this practice of resourcing, of learning to what those things are and learning to reach for them, can help us establish a sense of emotional safety. Over time, that practice can expand our capacity to then be a resource for others. And really importantly, this practice can help to generate a sense of power in the present moment, even if there are systemic conditions that make certain very important resources unavailable. And really just want to emphasize that this practice of resourcing and getting ourselves to a place where we can experience emotional safety, maybe experience some calm or some readiness, that in and of itself doesn't change the systemic conditions. But as we become more resourced, then we are able to do all of that important work to create systemic conditions that maybe cause less adversity and less harm to ourselves and others. So Judy's going to lead us in a little bit of practice, framing and practice.
Hi, everyone. Good to see everyone here and see you on the chat. We can move on to the next slide. And what you'll see is a really delicious torta. So we're right about lunchtime here, at least in LA. Maybe you've had lunch already. And if you haven't, I really want you to offer that. When you think of having lunch soon, I offer this self-care torta. A torta, if you don't know, I'm Mexican, and it's what most people would translate as a Mexican sandwich if you've never had that. And we in our work, Michelle and I, really focus on the social emotional learning, the well-being of the staff that works at school, really honoring the people, you all here, that are doing the work daily. And so what we like to offer is these simple but effective practices to return to a place of self-care in the here and now. So instead of what most of us do, which is like, self-care is at the end of the day. Maybe I'll go on a run or on a walk, or maybe at the end of the day is when I'll focus on actually eating because I've spent the whole day not eating. And I know that's really common as a principal, for example. Or maybe self-care, we usually say, well, on the weekend, I'll do X, Y, and Z, or when I go on vacation. But really, this self-care kind of approach, this torta approach, is slowing down our bodies, slowing down our mind, so that we can really actually tap into our body and letting our body be the guide of what we might need in that moment, responded to it by reaching for a resource of sorts or a tool or strategy, doing something, and then checking back in with yourself to see if that was effective and if it shifted any moods. So what this picture here shows is a delicious sandwich. The top of the sandwich, or the first layer, the bun, is asking us to do kind of like a self check-in, asking yourself questions like, how am I doing? How can I tell? Any thoughts, emotions, or sensations that are happening in that moment. From that, you reach to the delicious in between that sandwich, the nourishing, reaching for a nourishing resource. So maybe identifying something that you need to do. Maybe it's as simple as like, I need to eat something right now. I need some sugar, maybe another extra cup of coffee, some water. Maybe I just need to stretch up and do a gravity break and get up from my desk that I've been sitting on. Maybe I need to walk around. Actually, maybe I need some more sleep. Whatever it is, it's just nourishing yourself, figuring out what's going to be nourishing for you at that moment. And then after doing that is the bottom layer of the sandwich, is the checking back in with yourself. After doing that thing, how am I doing now? Has anything shifted? What are my thoughts like now, or my emotions and sensations? And the more we return to this kind of self-care torta moment, because it's really moment by moment that we're offering this practice that you try, you start really cultivating a life of self-care instead of just a moment of self-care, if you will. So this is an actual practice versus a destination or a product. And so to do that, and I hope that made some sense. And again, like, I encourage you to try an actual torta, a real one when you can, because they're delicious. We're going to do a breathing exercise and just noticing our breath. So if we can move on to the next slide, we're just going to take some time here and now because it's about 1:20. This technology live so far, you've probably had meetings already. Maybe you've been sitting wherever you've been sitting for quite a while. And I want to just kind of focus on our breath. So in this moment, if you can, stretch your body a little bit more, maybe your neck or your shoulders. I want to invite you, whatever feels comfortable. Maybe relax your feet a little bit. Widen your hips, whatever you can do. Whatever allows you to get just a little bit more comfortable in the place that you're at right now. And in mindful breathing, we're just going to start with noticing your breath. Just simply that. Noticing your breathing. Not putting any attention on how fast you're breathing or how slow you're breathing, just wherever your breath might be right now. And now that you kind of noticed your breath, now I'm going to ask you to nourish it a little bit more. So maybe start inhaling a little deeper, maybe in through your nose. And then just exhale, whatever feels comfortable. It could be through your nose or through your mouth, whatever is right for you. So inhale again, however long or short feels comfortable for you. And then just release. Now for the next 2 or so breaths, I want you to think about are you able to inhale and exhale a little bit longer? So let your exhale be longer than your inhale and trying that. See if that feels any good to you. So let's try that together. Inhale. And exhale. And again, at your own pace, whatever feels comfortable. When you actually allow yourself to exhale a little bit longer than that inhale, it really allows you to tap into your parasympathetic nervous system, or your sympathetic nervous system, really to drop in a little bit deeper and really get a deeper sense of relaxation. And for the next minute, just think of like playing with your breath a little bit more. Maybe you want to go a little bit faster. Maybe you actually need to slow it down. So really let your body be the guide of what exactly you might need right now. And for me, something that usually feels really, really good is being able to, in my breath in, kind of stretching up my shoulders up to my ears and maybe dropping my shoulders back as I exhale. And that's something that helps me because I tend to have a lot of tension in my chest and my neck and in my shoulder, especially because I've been sitting on the computer for quite a long time. So again, just whatever might feel comfortable for you. And then as we come to kind of a close on this very simple breathing exercise, I want you to think now, as you check in just a couple of minutes ago, are you feeling anything different? Was it helpful for you to focus a little bit more on your breath, being mindful of it? Did anything shift in your body? Are you feeling a different sensation? Sometimes you start feeling a little bit more tired, and that's okay. Sometimes it could energize you. It kind of just depends. Maybe any thoughts that shifted. Maybe at the beginning of today, it was everywhere, trying to figure out what you need to do after this. Maybe your thoughts settled a little bit more, and you can really enjoy the rest of today's webinar, being a little bit more present here and now. And I just want to invite you that is throughout the presentation, just notice your breath as we're going along. And if it feels comfortable for you, reach for some water, or maybe stretch up, stretch your chest, whatever you need to do to really care for yourself. Like I said, this self-care torta is always about noticing, nourishing, and noticing. And the more you do that throughout the day, the more you're caring for yourself every step of the way, instead of waiting for something like bigger to happen to care for yourself. So, okay.
Okay, thank you so much, Judy and Michelle. So now we'd like you to connect and reflect and share in the chat your answer to these two questions. What was the breathing practice like for you? And did you notice, as Judy mentioned, did you notice any shifts in your mind, body, or emotions? So just take a couple minutes and think about it, and then share in the chat, and then Sarah will share out a couple.
And while we're waiting, Monica Nepomuceno mentioned something at the start of this practice. She said she loves the idea of not leaving self-care until it's the last thing on our list, but infusing it throughout the day. And it's important to model and teach this to students. And that was exactly what I was thinking. If I don't meditate or do any of that self-care stuff first thing in the morning, it's not happening that day at all, as much as I might try. And I really appreciate how, I think Judy, you mentioned how important it is to notice, right? And just how important it is to stop and realize when we need to take that breath. And everyone else seems to be, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay, go ahead. I was just gonna say, I feel it helped me because my heart was truly pounding after not being able to get the screen to share. So I feel a little bit more calm now.
And everyone, other people seem to agree the breathing activity was very nice. It helped me relax, from Ann Silva. Linda Schlesinger, mindful breathing does help me relax and get into the moment. Wendy Barron feels much calmer and relaxed. Annalene makes a great point. It's not just for the kids, it's important for us too. And I remember when I was in the classroom having those moments where I should have just stopped to take a breath before talking, and how had I just realized at the time just how that can just change things right on their head. And Hilva mentions a good point. You can really do it at any time, no matter where you are. It's relatively easy to take a few deep breaths. And I don't know if those of you who have an Apple Watch, it does have that reminder function that tells you to breathe. I think for the first year that I had mine, I ignored it and probably said not very nice things to it when it came up. But it is a very nice function.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for sharing in the chat. We're going to move on now. So I believe it's important to provide some context for how we arrived at our current focus. So as a member of the Castles Collaborating States Initiative, the CDE convened an SEL state team for the first time in 2016. And the team was comprised of representatives from more than 20 California educational organizations and agencies. And team members represented diverse perspectives across education, SEL school climate and culture, child development, expanded learning, equity, social justice, and related fields. And the SEL state team worked to affirm SEL as an essential component of a well-rounded quality education for all youth and in youth-serving settings. Over the course of a couple years, the SEL state team developed 3 documents, and I'd like to expand upon 2 of them here. So the first one was the California SEL Guiding Principles, and designed to build on the implicit and explicit SEL practices already happening in many schools, and to promote the intentional use of evidence and research-based practices to guide decision making. So the guiding principles seek to empower local stakeholders to continue to advance SEL in ways that meet the needs of their specific contexts and populations. And our very own guest speaker, Wendy Barron, served on this task force. And you can find that at www.cde.gov/EO/IN/documents/SEL Guiding Principles WB.PDF. The second document is SEL in California Guide to Resources. And this guide highlights toolkits and online resource centers rather than standalone tools. And multiple resources offer guidance on a systemic approach to SEL implementation and continuous improvement processes in a variety of educational settings, which aligns with the spirit of the SEL guiding principles. So these are both excellent resources, and I recommend, if you haven't had time to do it, I recommend taking time to read through them. And at the SEL state team's final meeting, they provided the state with a set of recommendations to further the work. And the CDE has also recently convened a new state SEL team working on various topics. And Wendy also serves on this newly formed team. And so expect more good things to come from them. So many of you have probably already used at least one of the 3 signature practices, and we'd like to show you how they can be woven intentionally into meetings and other events. So our first signature practice is called a welcoming ritual. And welcoming rituals, they establish safety and predictability, and they support contribution by all voices in the meeting. And they set norms for respectful listening. They allow staff to connect with one another, and they create a sense of belonging for the staff. Much like a welcoming ritual is much like the check-in that we did at the beginning. And so to be successful, they should be carefully chosen and connected to whatever work of the day you're going to do, engagingly facilitated, and then thoughtfully debriefed as well. And some examples of this are adapted from the Oakland Unified School District is you can build a community by posing a question and asking staff to share with a partner. And right now we're in distance learning, so you can do breakout rooms. And actually Wendy will come give us a lot of ways, a lot of ideas on how we can have our staff share later on in the presentation. And then always debrief by sharing out a few of the answers. You can do a check-in, kind of what we did at the beginning of this webinar. And then you can also use sentence starters, and they can include things like a success I recently had, or one thing that is new about, or one norm I will hold today is. So we're going to go ahead and open the chat again. And this time we want to hear from you about what other welcoming ritual ideas have you seen or used, and what elements do you think made them particularly effective. So please share in the chat. We'll give you a couple minutes here, about a minute, and then Sarah will share out some of the answers. It's always just nice, Sarah, don't you agree, to check in with people? I know we're using that a lot now when we have meetings, just to check in, since we don't get to see each other now on a regular basis. It's kind of that water cooler talk that you used to do, just to go check in on everybody, say hi.
I'm enjoying them, especially when they are easy questions to answer, very low buy or high, I don't know if it's low buy-in or high buy-in, engaging questions, but easy to answer. I'm
right.
Enjoying. Yes, Peter Stoll, you said it. Easy to access, not challenging and positive. Ann Silva mentions that they're compliments for another staff member. What a great way to start a meeting. Dan Sackheim says, welcome back absentees with why and how they were missed. Yeah, put the spotlight on them right when they come back.
Yeah.
In a positive way.
Yeah.
Low stakes. Thank you, Peter. Share a success. Alejandro mentions, what is a high, low of your day or week? What are you currently grateful for? On the days when I'm doing what I should be doing in the mornings, checking in, doing self-care, and I'm making my gratitude lists, it's amazing how much they help, even just a couple of things. Joanne has a great one. Don't take too long. Short, sweet, to the point. And I think earlier Diane mentioned connecting to what you're doing that day really helps embed it in everything else. Hilda has a great idea, mood emojis, check-ins similar to the ones that we used on an earlier slide. And then asking about one thing in your environment that makes you feel safe or bring joy, especially when we're spending so much time in our homes.
Great. Thank you.
And one more from Wendy, sharing a success, what role you played in making that success and how it made you feel. What do you want to keep in mind for the future? Great points.
Great. Thank you again for sharing your ideas, and thanks, Sarah, for fielding the chats. So now we're going to move on, and I'm going to turn it over to Erica St. Andre, who is going to interview Dr. Lucy Vezzuto on how can leaders support adult SEL.
Thank you, Diane. I would like to introduce Dr. Lucy Vezzuto. Her mission is enabling youth's social and emotional growth and mind-body health. A Fulbright scholar in education, Dr. Lucy trains and coaches youth-serving professionals in a systematic approach to social and emotional learning, or SEL, student mental health, trauma-responsive education, and restorative practices. She contributed to the CDE's SEL resource guide and collaborated with colleagues to create the statewide SEL community of practice for County Office of Education staff. She was also invited to advise on the CDE's current SEL initiative. Before retiring from the Orange County Department of Education, she served on the CDE's Student Mental Health Policy Work Group and the California Multi-Tiered System of Support State Leadership Team. Dr. Vezzuto, thank you for being with us today. We appreciate your insights. So our first question, what are some top ways educational leaders can support teaching staff in this time of uncertainty?
Well, thank you, Erica, and it's my pleasure to be here. I'm always honored to be among hardworking educators across California. I have 5 points I wanted to address for this question. The first point is, as we all know, we are in challenging times, and we need to acknowledge that this is not business as usual. You know, being a leader right now is very, very tough. And one of the practices that can go a long way, not just with teachers, but with all staff, is to honor the experience that we're all feeling. You know, we all have anxiety and stress, and it's not just students. Both adults and youth are experiencing stress and fear and economic uncertainty, grief, feelings of loss for the disruption of work and family routines, even trauma. Kevin Baird, who's the leader of the Center for College and Career Readiness, said that teachers right now are experiencing the single most traumatic and transformative event of our modern era. One of the resources I'm going to share with you, and it's in the Google folder, is his short but really great article with a lot of strategies. And the title of it is Caring for Educators is the First Step in Serving Students. Many of you are also familiar with John Hattie's work. And right now, teacher confidence is really being challenged. And in John Hattie's work, he over and over has come up with one of the highest impact factors for educational outcomes is the confidence of the teacher. And so we are going to see self-confidence issues as well as mental health issues we need to be aware of. And so that's going to be an urgent priority. And so helping to reduce teacher stress and overwhelm. I loved Judy and Michelle's practices and the whole idea of, like, you know, just touching base and providing that experience. The second point is start with the adults. We want to, this is a best practice, by the way, to do systemic SEL. And we want to promote wellness, we want to promote self-care, and then the importance of maintaining our own social emotional competence and even practicing the skills like expressing and managing our emotions, asking for help, managing our stress. And was mentioned in the focus of this webinar is we can incorporate, as Michelle did and as Judy speaks to, these short stress reduction, self-calming practices in our online meetings, some movement exercises in our trainings, our online trainings, our teamwork, just like we did. This is one way that leaders can show they care, and they care about their staff as human beings. And by the way, care and support is also needed for leaders. The third idea is, again, use meetings and one-to-one interactions as an opportunity to strengthen relationships, sense of community, to create that deeper connection. So that opportunity to come together virtually or in person, to reflect on feelings, to share effective distance learning practices, to engage staff in decision-making and problem solving together is quite empowering, and it builds resilience, and it serves as an antidote to stress as well as preventing burnout. And leaders who do these kinds of practices are viewed as more empathic, involved, and interested. The third point, speaking about making decisions, is a process that I learned through restorative practices called FAIR process. We all need to make decisions as a leader. And the way we make the decision, though, can either isolate or create resistance among staff, or it can create trust among staff and engagement. And there's 3 E's of FAIR process: engagement, explanation, and expectation clarity. So the first is engagement. Before a decision is made, engage your staff in giving feedback. Take that decision and allow all points of view to be shared and listened to. The next is explanation. So you go away, make your decision, but come back to your staff and explain the why. Be very transparent. Talk about the feedback that you received and what you could use and what you couldn't use and why. And then finally, expectation clarity. What's expected of all of us? The research is very interesting. If people feel that the decision-making process is fair and they've been heard, then that can result in strengthening of trust, lowering resistance, and also individuals go above and beyond the call of duty in implementation. It's also a process that reduces stress because one of the contributors to chronic stress is lack of control, but you've given some control to staff, and it's a burnout prevention strategy. Finally, number 5, recognition and affirmation, another burnout prevention strategy. The top on the list of employees is, from their leaders, is the desire to be recognized and affirmed.
Great ideas. Thank you. What are things educational leaders should be looking for in order to gauge the social and emotional well-being of their staff? And what are areas of particular concern?
Thanks, Erica. Well, before the pandemic, the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence did a national study, asked teachers how they felt. The 3 top emotions were stressed, frustrated, and overwhelmed. Since then, they did follow-up studies, similar results, but with more depth of intensity. Another national study showed that about 2/3 of teachers experience high levels of stress. So we can assume anxiety, we can assume the possibility of some depression and some stress. And we can assume that some of our staff are very resilient as well. This past spring, as part of our Resilient Mindful Learner project here in Orange County, we supported 30 K-12 teachers by connecting with them during the pandemic. This was like March, April, and May, and we did individual conversations, phone conversations with them. Now, the Resilient Mindful Learner project focuses on building resilience and stress management first for teachers, and then teaching teachers how to incorporate these practices with their students in the classroom. Now, all the teachers were feeling the same thing as the national study. They were overwhelmed, they were anxious, they were frustrated. But what they all pretty much said when we had our conversation was, yeah, this is pretty stressful, but we have the tools. We know, what to do to self-calm ourselves, to take those moments of stretching, et cetera, to get into some regular healthy stress coping habits. And the other thing they really appreciated, and they saw when they practiced those, that it made this huge difference with how they interacted with their students, how they felt as well. And they really appreciated listening that was non-judgmental. They didn't necessarily want advice, although some would ask for it, but they really appreciated a listening ear. So signs and symptoms, you're going to see physical symptoms of chronic stress and anxiety, and those often show up in high rates of absenteeism. So you have the potential of expecting that. Cognitive and emotional signs that you may see, a whole range, the whole spectrum: withdrawal, irritability, aggressiveness, confusion, lack of concentration, negativity, memory problems, even the potential of being disengaged with their students. Another handout that is in the Google folder is some more information on how to support the mental health of your school staff.
Thank you. Does the modeling of routines and procedures around SEL practices translate into classroom instruction? And if so, how?
Absolutely. What we can model and do, when we're good role models of being self-calm, handling frustration, that transfers not only to our fellow colleagues when we're working together, but also to students, and it makes us more authentic practitioners. So for example, these 3 signature practices that are highlighted in this webinar, there's a corollary and information on using these in your classroom too. So what you're practicing here can vary easily, and several mentioned that in the chat as well. So we want to be good role models. We want to practice this ability to self-calm, self-regulate, kind of balance ourselves out in these uncertain times. What we found out when adults, and especially teachers, practice these social emotional skills is their quality of relationship with their students improves. They see students' behavior in a different way. They're able to be more empathetic with their students, more present. We taught mindfulness as well as stress management practices. We also found that we could reduce symptoms of burnout and improve global health. So routines and procedures in general reduce stress. That predictability. So as a leader, if you're predictable in how you facilitate your meetings and what's expected, and you address social emotional competence by doing small practices and exercises, that is comforting. And then that translates into the teachers. You know, teachers, once they learn something and they know it's good for themselves, I always find that they want to share it with their students as well. So, and lastly, the leaders, you can model these practices for your staff as well. Model the importance of self-care by sharing what you are doing to stay healthy and resilient. And it's one of the great things about this webinar that I really like is it gives you some very concrete strategies. So we know for sure that calmer, socially and emotionally competent adults can lead to calmer, more socially and emotionally competent kids.
Thank you. How can LEAs who have PBIS in place leverage that work in supporting SEL at their respective sites?
Thanks, Erica. PBIS, as you all know, is a multi-tiered behavior management system. This system can benefit from a more comprehensive approach and view of youth development through social emotional learning. CASEL's 5 competencies, self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, responsible decision-making, is a very well-researched frame and set of competencies that can guide what skills can be taught to students. Because the goal really is, yes, success in school and learning, but also a more holistic goal for young people, success in their personal relationships, in their community, when they go off to higher education and in the workplace. So PBIS is a good model and structure for how to take a systems approach to SEL by integrating SEL into the tiered intervention support. So for example, we're really trying to emphasize that the core of really building a strong foundation in Tier 1 of learning experiences for all kids in a whole variety and range of skills. And so the stronger the Tier 1 foundation, building student social emotional competence, and determining what are our students' needs, what's good for all kids, the less need you're going to have for Tier 2 and Tier 3. Now, they'll never be eliminated, but Tier 2 intervention can be based on SEL screeners, if you will, to identify those youth that need more depth, more skill development, and much more support. And then when we think about Tier 3 interventions, this goes into the realm of more serious emotional distress, mental health issues, and calls for more individual support, therapy, wraparound services, community partnerships, so that we can provide those services for students and families. And then lastly, excuse me, what the SEL approach and framework can contribute is youth voice and engagement, not only in learning, which you're seeing some aspects of that in the webinar, but also in their discipline experience. Responsible decision-making and problem solving are social emotional competencies, and they can make the experience of student discipline more restorative, more relational, and more engaging. So that the core aim, for instance, of being a restorative system or a restorative leader is that those individuals in positions of authority do things with others rather than doing things to them or for them. So it's this partnership together, and the core of that is relationship, because you can't restore relationships if someone did some harm to someone. The key idea here and paradigm is we want to restore that relationship but you can't restore a relationship you don't have in the first place. So we want to build relationships in community, and that can contribute to the PBIS behavior management system. We know this is good for all kids because being restorative in discipline lowers stress, is a trauma-informed practice, and kids want to be partners. They want to be seen as problem solvers and not just as problems. So how do you do this in a distance learning format? Through class meetings, through community circles, through interaction one-on-one distance-wise as well.
Thank you. And then finally, is there anything else you'd like to add for our educational leaders as they prepare for a very different opening of schools?
Being a leader right now is tough. I really encourage leaders to pay attention to their own health and wellness and their ability to role model social emotional competencies. So take self-care seriously. As mentioned already by my colleagues here, I see it as an ethical imperative. You can't give what you don't have yourself. It's okay to ask for help. That's a social emotional skill as well. You don't have to do this alone. And this is a message that can be shared with staff through your meetings, through your own messaging, through your own modeling. Using the SEL signature practices and integrating self-care practices within your collaboration meetings, your coaching sessions, your online meetings, your trainings is a great start for developing the competence of teachers, social emotional competence of teachers, as well as other staff. And so I just wanted to share a couple resources before I close today. There's a chart in the folder called Returning to School, Attending to the Social Emotional Needs of Students and Adults. In that matrix, there's more ideas on how to prioritize SEL when you come back, ways to get feedback from all your stakeholders, a lot of good resources, very, very practical resources there, how to cultivate staff SEL, signs and symptoms of mental health, and then finally in that document, what are some SEL strategies for kids in a distance learning environment? And then I've also already mentioned the article, Caring for Educators is the First Step in Serving Teaching Staff. So I just want to leave you with, we're all in this together, and I wish you all the best. Thanks so much. Thank you, Erica.
Thank you so much for your time today. And back to you, Diane.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Vezzuto, and thank you, Erica. Now let's move on to our second signature practice, and it's called Engaging Practices. So engaging practices, this is our sense-making time and brain breaks. So engaging practices are brain-compatible strategies, and they can foster relationships and cultural humility and responsiveness, empowerment and collaboration. And they're built in, weaved in so that they intentionally build adult SEL skills. And these practices can also be opportunities for brain breaks that provide a space for integrating new information into long-term memory. Otherwise, it's soon forgotten. Just like in the classroom, if the students don't practice what you just taught, they'll forget it. It won't go into long-term memory. And so now I would like to introduce Wendy Barron. Wendy is a teacher, author, researcher, and leader in the field of social, emotional, and academic development. And Wendy co-founded the Santa Cruz Silicon Valley New Teacher Project and New Teacher Center, a national nonprofit dedicated to improving student learning by accelerating the effectiveness of teachers and school leaders. And as Chief Officer, Social Emotional Learning, Wendy served on the initial CDE SEL Task Force, contributing to the development of California's SEL guiding principles and resources. And Wendy currently supports leaders and teachers to integrate SEL within staff meetings, professional development, academic and academic instruction, and MTSS. And she co-facilitates the statewide and Northern California SEL communities of practice and serves on the newly formed CDE SEL task force. So Wendy, can you give us some examples of engaging practices?
I would love to, and thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. So this area of engaging pedagogy is, as Lucy was mentioning, we have opportunities to integrate these practices in meetings, professional development, and in everyday lessons. And so one way is just inviting our educators to brainstorm, share ideas. So just like we did earlier, where we were sharing ideas in the chat box about how just our own self-care practices, and that's just one thing you can do is use a chat box. Also pair sharing. So we want our teachers and educators and staff to be thinking together, and it could be that you pose a question and maybe there's a Zoom room where we get together in partners or triads or groups of 4, or maybe even phone call to a partner to talk something over, and then that accountability of coming back and sharing. Another one is using what's called Think, Ink, Pair, Share. So there are so many different, as you know, ways to use Google. So one extension for Google is called Jamboard. And so an example might be that you pose a question to the staff, such as, what do you think the social emotional learning needs of students will be when we return to school? And you put a link to the Jamboard, and folks can either grab Post-its and put Post-its on, or they can put pictures on or write. And so that's one way. Or using a Padlet, and at the end of our meeting, Diane is going to be using a Padlet with us. So we'll get an experience of just being able to put our ideas together. And one thing I like is when I'm in a breakout room and then my group has a Padlet or a Jamboard page that we're required to use, and we have a recorder, so we're recording it, and when we come back, we share it out, but then afterwards we have a record of what we all came up with, and so we can share that. So those are a few ideas, and we have just a few more. Again, with Google, there are one more extension that you can use is for diagrams. So you can create fishbones or criteria matrices or even mind maps. And so with that, we could do something like a mind map on, you could assign different groups a particular SEL competency and ask your staff members to focus on one competency in each group and talk about, so what kind of emotion regulation strategies might we teach our students, or how might we develop self-awareness in our students? And we'll be getting ideas such as, oh, we can have our students self-assess and set goals. Or like we did in the beginning, we could do some breathing activities. So, or with criteria, we might have a decision that we need to make. And in real time, we could be looking at what are the pros and what are the cons of a particular decision that we're trying to make. I wanted to go back to the Padlet for just 1 second. I worked with a middle school staff, and as we were just getting into distance learning, there was something that the assistant principal posted, which was GOTS, gives, and gets. So teachers were posting, well, what have they been trying? And what could they give to someone else? Like, oh, I'm trying a menu, and here's a menu sample that you might try with your students. And then the gets were, and what do I need, so that teachers could support one another with their pedagogy, this distance learning pedagogy, because as Lucy mentioned, the confidence level, is low in some cases, especially around using new technology and all these new tools. As we saw, even Diane in the beginning, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm responsible for all these people and getting everything organized and putting people in groups. Also, Jigsaw. Jigsaw is, of course, a great cooperative learning way of working, and making sure that you assign roles, or even assign prior to the meeting a particular portion that would be shared through a Flipgrid or Google Jamboard, so that when you come to the meeting, that everyone is prepared with something to share already. And finally, one more opportunities for interaction is just thinking about in what ways can we get people together, because the tendency, what we've been learning, what you've probably been learning, is that it's easy to kind of turn off your video and do something else and kind of be half listening. As soon as we're in groups and we have accountability to one another to turn our videos on and talk and make meaning and dialogue, read an article, discuss it. Lucy gave us some great resources that, we could just come together to figure out how we might use something, apply something, and think together. So we don't have to stop with distance learning. We can have all these structured protocols. And the last thing I wanted to add is that having some community agreements and some communication guidelines will really support everyone in developing that culture and climate where there's safety and trust and respect for diverse perspectives. And people will show up much more when everyone feels included and a sense of belonging for all. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for those great examples, Wendy. So now we're going to do some reflecting with small groups in breakout rooms. And so once I set up the breakout rooms, you're going to click on the Join Your Breakout Room invitation on your screen. And once you're in your breakout room, your bottom navigation, it might change or it will change slightly. So providing you with a new Ask for Help button, which will invite the host to your breakout room, and Leave Breakout Room button as well, which will return you to the main room. And so when you're in your breakout rooms, we'll give you about 6 minutes to introduce yourself to the group, and then just discuss what ideas have you heard so far that have really resonated with you, and what ideas have you heard that you might want to learn more about.
And while we're setting up, if anyone wants to share any takeaways in the chat, anything that you could use to engage your own staff, engage adults, or anything else that you'd like to learn about, and then I can call on you or we can talk more about it. And while we're waiting for some people to come in our group, we talked about just the breakthrough that self-care is a priority and not a luxury. It's not, dessert that maybe you have at the end of the day, but it's something to be woven in throughout the day. I know for myself, it's hard to wrap my mind around that sometimes. And then also, how do you effectively handle SEL and also maintain confidentiality, especially if you are trying to have, really tough conversations or, trying conversations with someone virtually without that connection? How do you establish trust and confidentiality through a virtual environment? That came up. And then Erica mentioned that in her group, Linda shared that calming and breathing practices she used as a teacher in the past are finally becoming seen as the essentials they truly are. I can understand that completely. It goes from being something that's joked about to pretty soon, oh, everyone's doing it. Why weren't we doing it sooner? Oh, thank you, Aline. And then we have a link to the Self-Care University above, and I'll try and pull that down in just a moment as well. Barb is going to get a doctorate from Self-Care University. I don't know. I'm still doing my prerequisites. I don't think I could get in. And if there's no one, thank you, Hilva. Hilva's group talked about the importance of self-management and having self-compassion for themselves and to cut everyone some slack during the stressful time. Agreed, 100%.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you again for participating in the chat. And now we're going to move on to our signature practice 3, and this is the optimistic closure. And so an optimistic closure are reflections and looking forward, and you end your meeting this way by having the staff reflect on and then name something that helps them leave on an optimistic note. And this provides a positive closure and reinforces the topic, and it creates momentum to take towards taking action after the meeting. And some examples, again, from the Oakland Unified School District are reflect and share. What are my next steps? Who do I want to connect with on this topic? A word or phrase that reflects how I feel about moving forward with this, or offer appreciation for someone in the room. And all those examples that Wendy gave us earlier during engaging practices, we can use those during distance learning, like the chat, Padlet, Google Jamboard, breakout rooms, or polls or surveys, to have staff answer these questions before leaving, much like a ticket out the door, but a virtual ticket. Okay, so we just introduced these 3 practices, the opening rituals and the engaging practices, and also optimistic closures. And so some final thoughts before moving into our question and answer period. So establishing these 3 practices is beneficial for every adult participant, and it's absolutely essential for some. And adults who come to our meeting after a day or a week or a lifetime of a difficult situation, they need calming and centering and focusing routines in order to fully participate. Okay, and now I'm going to turn it over to Sarah, and Sarah's going to give us some of her final thoughts. Right, one more.
There we go, unmuting. Oh, sorry. There we go.
Yes.
My final thought. Humans are internally soothed by sameness, while paradoxically our brains need freshness too. It's balancing novelty within routines and rituals that allows us to move with confidence through our workdays while navigating multiple competing demands on time, energy, and attention. These routines provide a solid foundation for our most overextended participants to be engaged as learners and contributors. So even in this time of upheaval and change and technical difficulties, we can definitely be helped with routine when it's carefully chosen. And then I'll take it over to Erica for our final thought.
Thank you. So in order for the learning to be purposeful and applicable, adults need direct, concrete experiences to use what they've learned, and they need structures that promote self-direction. Also, that productivity and creative thinking result only when our basic human needs have been met and our neocortex is engaged and available. So just embracing those self-care techniques with the adults first, so that they can then impart those onto our students. Back to you, Diane.
Thank you. So now we're at our question and answer session. So if you'd like to ask a question to one of our panelists or guests, please use the chat to ask questions, and we'll answer them. But while we're waiting, if we can go ahead and advance to resources, Sarah. So while we're waiting for some to come in, then I'll go ahead and talk about the resources. So the folder that Dr. Vezzuto and also Wendy and Michelle and Judy, you can find resources from this webinar at www.bit.ly/2xs0cg7. And then we also have the CDE's SEL distance learning webpage at www.cde.ca.gov. /CI/SE/SEL distance.asp. And this is a new site, and it has 4 different distinct areas for leaders, teachers, parents and guardians, and students. And we're hoping to add a 5th area, which will include all these webinars later on. And also the Meaning Makers Collective, if you want more information about Michelle and Judy, check out their website, and their bio is also in the Google folder, and that's at www.meaningmakerscollective.com.
And one question came in from Suzanne, 2 questions from Suzanne. One, the Google folder, I believe that is the bit.ly link, which is right on the PowerPoint. And in a moment, I'll put it in the chat as well. And then another question, what is meant by structures that promote self-direction? I'm not sure if that's addressed to.
Yeah, I can speak to that. The idea that educational leaders are giving the trust and efficacy to their teachers to kind of navigate and explore the strategies that they know will work best for the students in their class. And so just making sure that that with guidance and direction, that teachers feel that they have the ability to kind of pursue the strategies that we've talked about in a way that makes the most sense for their class.
Thank you, Erica. And I don't see any other questions in the chat at this point.
Okay, great. Then we'll go ahead and before we finish, can you advance, Sarah,
Sure.
to the next slide? Okay, so before we go, we want to do our 3rd signature SEL practice, and that's an optimistic closure. So take a moment to reflect and then share on Padlet. What 3 ideas are you taking with you, and what 2 things do you want to apply? So our second webinar coming up at the end of August will focus on maintaining strong relationships with our students. And our 3rd webinar is supporting social and emotional development outside of school. And then our final webinar is entitled Engaging Youth and Building Life Skills. So I believe, Erica, the date for the 2nd webinar is now August 27th. Is that correct?
That's correct, at the same time. So 1 o'clock on Thursday, August 27th. And I saw a question in the chat regarding a link. And so, yes, we will be promoting and sending that out in another week or 2.
Right. Okay, great. And then our final 2 dates and times will be announced soon. They'll probably be in September or October for the final 2.
We got lots of great things coming in on the Padlet, having a framework for opening and closing meetings, implementing the 3 key practices that we talked about today, ideas for Jamboard, listen, recognize, and affirm. I keep on thinking about the torta, but that's because I think I missed lunch.
Yeah.
Optimistic closure, remembering to take care of ourselves so we can care for others. And then again, that self-care is not a luxury, it's a priority. It should be part of our day-to-day lives.
Great. And the link to this Padlet is also, the PowerPoint here is in that Google folder. And so the link to this Padlet, you can come back and check answers later. And so we talked about our upcoming webinars. And then finally, our division shares a lot of information regarding professional learning. And you'll find the links to these resources on the CDE SEL webpage at the www.cde.ca.gov/CI/SE/index.asp. And then we encourage you to join the SEL listserv by sending a blank email message to join SEL planning at mlist.cde.ca.gov. And finally, you can follow us on Twitter at CDE_SEL. So thank you for, Sarah, next slide. So thank you so much for hanging in with us, and sorry about the technical difficulties difficulties about sharing the screen. But I just want to thank the CDE SEL team, Erica, St. Andre, Sarah, Julia Agostinelli, Emily Oliva, Hilva Chan, and Monica. And then also our guest presenters, Dr. Lucy Vezzuto, Wendy Barron, Judy Fernandez, and Michelle Curta. Thank you so much, and stay safe and be well. Thank you. Bye-bye.